Welcome, welcome, welcome to Empowered Women in Business International Radio. I'm your host, Nicole Mosby Taylor, also known as Taylor K on the mic. And what a pleasure to have each and every one of you join us this evening. Thank you so much for choosing part of EWBI tonight. We have a special show for you planned. I'm not going to who's on here yet, but let me just tell you, he is phenomenal, and you don't want to miss this show. So I'm just out of the day. I'm having a little technical difficulties here today. So if you just with me, I'm going to go to our quote, and our quote, this is Black History Month. So what a how appropriate it is for me to have a quote from Rosa Parks, if I can bring it up. Let's see. Devices just want to show off today, but let me just type it in real quick. So, how is everybody doing out there? I hope amazing. Hi, Nicole. I see Nicole Bennett joined us this evening. So my quote today is, "You must never be fearful about what you are doing when it is right," by Rosa Parks. You must never be fearful about what you are doing when it is right, by Rosa Parks. Isn't that amazing? Sometimes you just have to stand up for what you believe in, no matter what cost, whether it cost you, losing a job, losing friends. But it's important for us to be able to stand up for what we believe in. So you'll see why this quote is so important, because we have none other than Dr. Tyrone Powers on the show this evening. So we're going to bring him on. Good evening, Dr. Powers.
Good evening. Glad to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yes, we are so glad to have you on again, and hopefully we'll make this real quick so you can go take care of what you gotta take care of.
Yeah, fighting this COVID, but I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be alive, and I know I'll get past this too, because we all are very resilient people.
Yes, and you look good, so you don't look like you're sick.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
So, could you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself this evening?
Absolutely. I was born and reared in Baltimore. Was a Maryland State Trooper for a number of years and a special agent with the FBI, working a little bit of everything: counterintelligence, foreign counterintelligence, terrorism, organized crime, white collar crime. Worked undercover in drug organizations. Came back after that career, earned my PhD from American University, where I taught there for a brief period of time. I ran the Homeland Security and Criminal Justice Institute at Anne Arundel Community College. Now I am the director of collaboration and special initiatives, and I am the CEO of the Powers Consulting Group and serve as an expert witness in police use of force cases, and as a consultant to different offices like the State's Attorney's Office in Prince George's County, Maryland, and other locations, and as a consultant to a number of law firms. And I'm teaching now at EWBI State University, which is interesting because you started with the Rosa Parks quote, and my students now, we're reading one of the most powerful books I can say, that explain what Black women had to overcome, is called At the Dark End of the Street. And my students who were unfamiliar with the complete history of Rosa Parks had kind of relegated her to the Montgomery bus boycott. But in The Dark End of the Street, what it explains, it tells her entire story about how she was doing that work, dealing with women who were being sexually assaulted, who were being raped, who were being harmed. She was doing that work way before she ever went to the NAACP, way before she ever participated with Dr. King in the Montgomery bus boycott. She had an entire life of service, of helping women, Black women, before any of that occurred. And the students, the young students who had never known this, are remarkably engaged now, and so they just had never heard this. And all their education from K through 12, and now in higher education, they had never heard the story of her, and they had never heard the story of these Black women that are the subject of At the Dark End of the Street, which is it's a hard read only because it's so graphic about how they were abused and what they had to go through and the trials and what the court did to them. But it's the students find it enlightening because it shows what these women overcame, to overcome these horrific situations that they had to deal with. And Rosa Parks is at the center of that, things that people didn't even know about.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know about that, but I will check out that book.
It's a powerful, it's a hard read. It's gonna make you cry. It's gonna make you angry. It's factual. It's once you start reading it, you're not going to want to put it down, but it is going to be. It's going to be. It's difficult to read because it's so graphic, but it's every class I've taught, whether it was at EWBI or any place else, I always introduce this book, At the Dark End of the Street, and everyone who read the stories, and especially the Black women, say this should be mandatory reading for everyone, K through 12, because it would help us understand what we've overcome, and it would help the issues we have with self-esteem and self-concept. Because if these women can endure this, there's certain things that we shouldn't settle for now, shouldn't allow for now, even if we're just doing it for the sake of these women who went through so much so that we wouldn't have to.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. I can't wait to get it. When I get
Uh,
offline, I have to order 2 books. That is one of them. And the next one is, can you guess? So tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, my book is Eyes to My Soul: The Rise or Decline of a Black FBI Agent, and it's a biography of my life. When I went into the FBI, there was a lot of pushback with me joining the FBI because of its antagonistic relationship with the Black community historically, what they've done. Where people are even seeing that more now with the movie like Judas and the Black Messiah, how the FBI was detrimental to the Black community. So I received a lot of pushback. And so what this book details is how I came to that decision growing up here in Baltimore City. It's intimate details about my family and the things that made us stronger and better, even though some of the writing were extremely difficult. I had to talk about in detail the rape of my sister by our father, our biological father. I had to get her permission to write about that. But the good thing about writing about that, as an aside, is that it allowed me to travel this country and outside this country, from Cuba to Bermuda and around the world, and address an issue that was rarely talked about. I went to a church in Tennessee where the pastor explained to me it was a mega church, and I won't name it for the reasons that I'm about to put forward, and that is because the pastor told me 70% of the Black women in that church had been molested at some point in their life, and it was psychologically impacting them. So I didn't write the book to focus on that, but because I talked about that, it's put me in front of audiences around the world to talk about those issues, as well as the work I did with the FBI, the things that happened in our community, the exploitation of our community, the drugs, the impact that drugs and alcohol have had in our community, because I learned that from the inside. So despite all the pushback that people didn't want me to go into the agency, I think that it was God ordained, because what it has done is taught me so much. I learned so much about our history and what has happened to us, which was intentional in terms of setting us back. And so I write about all of that. And the rise or decline is because initially, obviously, you're going into the FBI, it's considered the number one law enforcement agency in the world. So, you know, you're leaving the streets of Baltimore. We grew up in relatively what you would call poverty, and now you're rising up, and now you've gone from the ghetto streets of Baltimore to the FBI. But in the end, because of what I witnessed within that organization and the things that I learned, I don't know whether it was a rise or a decline. So I leave that up to the reader to discern as I go through the different parts of my life, and and also it's the different parts of my careers with the state police and the FBI and post that.
Right, because the so with the FBI, you speak about in your book, you speak a little bit about the racism that you had to overcome during your time there.
Yeah, they you know, when I was in the academy, and I write about this in the book, I was, you know, we stayed in the dorm. You get trained at Quantico, Virginia, and in my dorm room, you know, guys came in the room dressed as Klansmen. I mean, you're in the FBI academy, and the FBI, remember, is responsible for investigate civil rights violations, and I guess they thought it was a joke, but I write about it in the book. I've actually had the opportunity to testify with Maxine Waters before Congress about some of these things too that have occurred in that agency. It's an agency that was headed, obviously, for all of his life, J. Edgar Hoover, that did not want women or blacks or any people of color to be a part of that organization, and they were forced in a position to allow blacks in. And but it didn't mean that they had to allow you in, but it didn't mean they accepted you. And so I had to deal with those particular issues. And then, like I said, the flip side of that is that I learned about how they actually propagated some of the division in our community. Many people, I knew prior to going in, because I had an undergraduate degree from Coppin State University. I knew about COINTELPRO, which is the counterintelligence program directed at the Black community, intentionally designed to prevent Black leadership, to disrupt Black organizations. The FBI poisoned the food for the Breakfast for Children program, so the parents would become angry at the Black Panther Party. They actually poisoned children. But I was actually see these documents firsthand while I was in there. So it wasn't any philosophical, theoretical conspiracy theory, because now I was in the agency with these documents in front of me, where it was talking about where I was seeing that the agency that I was sitting at the desk reading these actual documents. And it's just a powerful statement, because if you look at some of the things that are happening in our community today, they're not just happenstance. True, some of us have fallen for the tricks and the traps, but somebody set the traps. And what I was able to learn during my time with that agency is that they were very good at doing that, and then providing the escape mechanisms. For example, you know, a city like Baltimore, we have 2,000 liquor stores. We have more liquor stores in Baltimore City than they have in 38 states. And no other community who were not people of color would allow that. I mean, even if we're not judging people for their behavior, you don't need to have 2,000 liquor stores in the 94 square miles, which is Baltimore City. That makes no sense whatsoever. What you're doing is having children walk by liquor stores to go to school, walk by liquor stores to go to church. You are psychologically impacting their thinking, because that's what they're seeing on a regular basis. And even without that's detrimental. So those things are intentional.
Yeah, it creates that normalcy that they think that this is how the way of life. This is, you know, a person in their environment. They see this thing, and once you start to create that normalcy, and I think that was one of the good things about the bill that was passed, that didn't allow children to go into liquor stores, you know, to buy candy and junk food, because it was creating that normalcy of them going in there, you know, as if they were an adult to, you know, to make that purchase. So
Yeah, and having an impact on their brain, because we know from the Harvard University study that the brain of a male doesn't fully mature until 26. So the decisions we're making until 26 are not completely made with a full brain. For a female, the brain completely finishes its physiological growth by the age of 22. And so these young children who are being impressed by going into these stores in the liquor, it's their brain is still developing. That's why we came. That's the concept of arrested development. You can actually stop their natural development if you're throwing all this trauma or all of these other images into their head, and it has a major impact on them. And then we know too that all violent crime occurs within 500 feet of a liquor store, and the reason that occurs is because if I know that people like to drink, I know they like to escape their reality through a substance, then if I am selling drugs, I'm going to set up near that and give them an alternative. This is why you'll go down any street here and you'll see a McDonald's and then a Chick-fil-A, because what they discerned is people like fast food in this area. So I set up near people where people like fast food. If the liquor stores are there and I'm a drug dealer, I realize that people are trying to escape their reality through alcohol. So I give them an alternative. So the drug dealers set up within close proximity of the liquor stores. So we know, that's why we know that almost all violent crime occurs within 500 feet of a liquor store, because that's where the other violent behavior is taking place. When they remove those, for example, I live here in Baltimore, Maryland, and we had a liquor store outlet, a little strip mall that was only 2 blocks away from us. But when they destroyed that mall, and now BG&E have bought that territory, there's no one hanging out. Crime has gone down in the area. There's no one hanging out. There's no drug dealing. So just by removing that from this area, it automatically reduced crime. And now BGE owns it, so there's no reason for anybody to hang out there, because it's just a huge lot for the Baltimore Gas and Electric. So we know there are some solutions that can be put in place to deal with that, but we also have to understand, as you clearly indicated, the psychological impact of not addressing these issues, the psychological impact it has on our children. They're dealing with trauma. Their brains are not fully developed, and it impacts their self-esteem, their self-concept. And it impacts what they think they can accomplish on a daily basis, what they see. We know young people learn from observation, participation, and demonstration. The last way they learn is a whole lot of conversation. So what they see is what they internalize. And if they're seeing traumatic events, they internalize that in a brain that is still developing. So that traumatic events become a permanent part of their thought process. But if we can put them in a position where they're not seeing that all the time, then they will allow their brains to advance in another direction. Unfortunately, again, my years in the FBI demonstrated clearly that some of these things are intentional.
Well, that's what my next point was going to be. So ACEs, advanced childhood experiences, why don't more people know about it? Why isn't this an important factor when looking at crime, when looking at our children, and just just the disadvantage that children have in certain neighborhoods versus others, but they're still judged on the same scale.
Yeah, because we don't articulate it enough. I mean, a program like your program here that brings out these issues, people may be learning it for the very first time. And if people are not taught it and they don't understand it, they see what they see, but they don't necessarily understand what they see. And that's the whole part and the foundation of education that all of our great leaders historically have talked about, from Sojourner Truth to Mary McLeod Bethune. If people are not getting that, even in our school systems, to an extent, people are not getting that. So like I said before, when I'm teaching the students at Bowie or at DePaul University where I taught, or where I'm lecturing in Jersey, or wherever or even at Yale Law School, I lectured there. When I begin to explain these things to people, they're hearing them for the first time. And these are technically people who are educated, but you still have to give them that information. And then when people have that information, they can come up with solutions. When I was in the FBI, they had a sign over the door down there. They said, superficial understanding can only lead to superficial solutions. In order to effectively change things, you got to have a full understanding. And I know the young people who I'm teaching now at Bowie in the race, crime, and gender classes, they fill up every semester now. The students love the course because they're learning some things for the first time. We were dealing with, and I know this is Your program is a woman's empowerment show, but some of the, and I want to share them with you in writing. Some of the things that the young ladies have written to me after we've had our discussions about things that they were dealing with in their personal lives that we were able to discuss in the midst of a class called Race, Class, Gender, and Criminal Justice. We talked about the intersectionality that Black women have to deal with race and gender. So they're dealing with that at the same time. And then if you're dealing with poverty, then you're dealing with the intersectionality of race, class, and gender. All three of those. And you're walking around with that burden on your back every single day. And they talked about the different things about, and these are young ladies talking about how it had impacted their esteem. And they said, Doc, I'm glad we had this conversation. And then they began to come forward with me. One young lady said that when she grew up in her household, there was so much domestic violence that when she first started dating, she didn't even take exception to her boyfriend hitting her because it became normalized. And we were able to change the thought process. We were able to think, and then she wrote back to me, and I can show you the things they write to me. These are beautiful young ladies who are saying, you know what, I hadn't thought about it this way. I talked to them about some of the music that they listen to. I said, I understand you love the beat. I said, but you cannot consistently listen to music that calls you out of your name and not have it impact your esteem and your concept. And one of the young ladies wrote back to me and she said, you're absolutely right. And she said, you know, I used to love the beat. She said, but Doc, since I've been taking your class, I can't enjoy it like I used to. She said, because now I recognize it. So to your question, we have to help them recognize it. We have to preach to them, but we have to teach them and help them recognize. We don't have to condemn them, because I never condemn in my class. If you beat people, they don't want to listen to you. If you teach people, then they want to listen to you. I don't condemn them for whatever experiences they've had gone through, whatever faults and flaws, like all of us have faults and flaws. I don't condemn them for that, but we teach, and I think it is changing lives. So I think that's what we have to do on a regular basis. Your program is part of that solution, and we just need more of it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, also, as I was reading the summary for your book, it made mention, I want to just go back to the racism for a little bit before we continue on this route. But in the book, you made mention of them taking a picture of an ape and putting them on somebody's child's picture, one of your coworkers or your peers' picture in place of their face.
Right. And in the FBI, these were other special agents who did this to a coworker who was also a special agent. And on the pictures that he had on his desk, another agent, a good friend of mine who's now retired, Prince Ross, who was a supervisor with me in the FBI, someone put a statue of an ape on his desk. And he kept it there because he said that he wanted to be clear those he was working with, not just those he was working against in terms of the cases we were investigating, but those he was working with, and he kept that on his desk. So this is an agency. Think about this too. The agency have less Black special agents now than it had 10 to 15 years ago. And they keep saying that, well, Blacks are not applying, they're not qualified, they have character issues, they can't. They have some background and some juvenile issues and all. And so, and part of that is trickery too. Think about that. I was telling a group of young people, I was saying that, look, marijuana has been made legal in so many states, but the federal government still listed as a Schedule 1 offense, which simply means that they treat marijuana just like it's heroin or cocaine. So when you use marijuana, this is what I say to the young people, you are locking yourself out of 700,000 federal jobs. So you have to make a decision whether a 20-minute high is worth a 20-year career at a 6-figure salary. And many of the young people say, well, I thought if it was legal. I said, no, that legal, it can be legal and still keep you out of a position. But they said, well, who tells us that? Because we hear legal, and this is what I mean by the development of the brain. They said, we hear legal and we think, okay, and then all of a sudden we go to get a federal job where we need a clearance, and we're locked out of 700,000 federal jobs that may pay figures or more because we thought because it was legal we were doing the right thing until someone said that to them. Then they said, okay, well, no, even if I like getting high, it ain't worth a 20-year career. It's not worth a 20-year career and a six-figure salary. You know what I mean? So once we provide that information too, and that's part of the racism, the systemic racism in the system that then the FBI used to say we can't hire more black agents. We have less black agents now than we had 10 or 15 years ago because they have character issues. They've used marijuana. They've used drugs. They've had these other issues, but we don't prepare our young people necessarily to go into these agencies. And then the systemic racism prepares them not to be able to go into the agencies.
Right. What about so we understand that this is not just happening in the FBI.
Right. No doubt. It's happening.
So I just read an article about a young man in was it Kentucky? And basically the article was saying this young man just released information about to Black Lives Matter. So he was a black state trooper or officer, and he had released some information to Black Lives Matter, and so he was let go because of that. So my parallel I wanted to draw was to the Capitol and what recently happened at the Capitol, because how can you have what happened at the Capitol where we had deaths occur because of the negligence of the head of the Capitol Police, but he was able to retire. This gentleman released some information, nobody was hurt, but he was fired. You know, that difference.
Yeah, there's a double standard, no doubt about it. And the racism, the systemic racism, um, clearly demonstrates that through different agencies, like you said, not just the FBI, but police agencies and others throughout the country. The only thing I would say, the only thing I would add to him, is that he probably could have anticipated that. See, strategically, we have to be strategic because we're dealing, racism is real and there is a double standard. And until we fix that double standard, then we have to strategically negotiate or navigate it, in other words. So if that was his desire, there's some consequences and maybe the consequences was worth it. It's not right and it's not fair, but there's probably another way that he could have achieved the same goal. And the reason why I say that is because you can be a part of the solution, strategically assist. I'm trying to say this as best I can. Strategically assist in getting information out without putting yourself at risk. You just have to do it in a way that doesn't put yourself at risk, because you're not going to be judged by the same standard. It's not going to be fair and equal, because this is what we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with racism, and we're dealing with people who have no desire, and there's no point in history that we can point to some divine intervention that will make them say, you know what, I think we should treat black people fair. They're not going to do that. I mean, it's going to take time, the continuous pressure that we put, the protests, the Black Lives Movement protests and all of that. And at the same time, while we're moving towards that goal, I never say a goal of equality, because to me, if we say we're moving towards the goal of equality, then we're saying that we want to be equal to them. And right now, I don't know who are they to be equal to. You know what I mean? We want to be better. I never use the terminology that I'm trying to be equal to you. I want you to be, I'm not, because in that, I'm saying that you are better and I'm trying to be where you are, and they're not better. So there's some other terminology we should use other than equality. But the fact of the matter is that until that happens, then we have to be strategic in our actions. And that's key. And that's one of the things I think that I learned in the FBI because of all my undercover work in counterintelligence and counterterrorism. The strategy is important to how you get to the outcome and the objectives. So sometimes I can take the direct route, but many times I have to be surreptitious in my actions, but I'm trying to achieve a certain objective. So if I want to get information out to Black Lives Matter, I have to be strategic in doing that, because I don't want to cut off my nose to spite my face, knowing that the system is unfair, it's not right. But I also know this is how it works, and I have to be prepared to deal with that.
Mm. So we're going to take a quick break, but keep it locked right here to Empowered Women in Business International Radio.
Welcome to the Housewives of Baltimore. I'm Lady T. Witt. Thank you for joining us. Today is Valentine's Day. The Housewives of Baltimore is not just a salon, it's an experience.
Welcome back to Empowered Women in Business International Radio. I'm your host, Taylor Kay on the mic, and we are here with a very special guest, Dr. Tyrone Powers, who is telling it like it is, not is, but tis, like they say. So we were just talking about the Kentucky police officer that was fired for allegations of sharing information to the Black Lives Movement. But this is not the only one. So I was also doing some research and I saw Channel 4, Channel 4 Washington also is looking into Black troopers allegedly discriminated against in the Maryland State Police Department. Maryland State troopers, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a number of investigations going on right now. There's an investigation. I know a report has been released on some discrimination, some alleged discrimination in the Prince George's County Police Department and the Maryland State Police. Obviously, we've had lawsuits, some of them who have been settled and successfully settled in the Baltimore City Police Department and police agencies across the country of what Black officers experience in these particular agencies on the inside. I guess if there's any, the good thing is that they are beginning to take action. In other words, they're beginning to file lawsuits or get plaintiffs, or at least asking for an investigation of these particular issues, and they're not just allowing them to happen without making some kind of response to them. So for years, the history of policing, as you know, in a city like Baltimore, Black police officers weren't even allowed to arrest white people. When they first came on the police department in the 1960s, they couldn't even arrest white people. They could only make arrests of Black people.
Wow.
So internally, there have been issues in policing. But here's the other part of that too. Even as we deal with racism in the police agencies, the discrimination, the allegations of discrimination, of racism within the police agencies, there are Black police officers too who have bought so much into policing that they are just as much as part of the problem when it comes to brutality. In some cases in the Black community as white officers, because they're so busy trying to fit in till they miss their whole goal of protect and serve and upholding justice. So both of those are issues within police departments. And you're right. More of the agencies, what's happening with the state police, what's happening in Prince George's County, what happened in Baltimore City. Baltimore City is under a consent decree now. We know what happened with the gun trace task force, which is something that will impact a city like Baltimore for years to come. We know what happened in New Orleans with policing down there, where you had police officers years ago actually committing murders and killing people who witnessed police doing participating in misbehavior. So the thing is that we need people of color in these agencies, but we need people of color in conscious.
Definitely. So your book this year made a special year for your book.
Yeah, it's the 25th anniversary actually of the book. So I added some things to it. updated some things in the book because people asked me to do that. The book did, like I said, we did extremely well, and it sent me around the world to from Bermuda to Cuba to all kind of places. And then when this year people requested that we put out a new edition, so that's what we did. So the book now, Eyes to My Soul: The Rise or Decline of a Black FBI Agent, is in a new edition. There's a new cover, a new look, and also some additional a forward, a prelude, a new introduction by Herb Boyd, who is a award-winning writer. He did the introduction to the book for me, so that's the new edition.
Awesome. Awesome. I can't wait to pick it up. And I hope
Mhm.
everybody that's listening takes heed and picks it up too. Some great information, I'm sure. Um, so when do you rest?
I think I'm gonna rest more now since I'm dealing with this COVID. That's for sure.
Well,
But
I'm sure you're gonna get some now, but I'm talking
yeah,
about doing a normal, healthy. Um,
yeah, yeah. It's I guess I get rest. I mean, I am actually doing. I've been smart enough to bring on other people to work with me with the Powers Consulting Group because I'm looking at so many cases. And like I said, I'm traveling, and we did some security training in New Jersey, at the hospital, training their security officers and training supervisors in Philadelphia and working in Chicago. So it's been extremely busy. Again, numerous cases on use of force here in the state of Maryland and working with the Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office. So it's busy. It's good work though. You feel good about it, and you just have to pace yourself and prioritize, and then get it done. And you're right. You do have to find time to get some rest because you can't be effective unless you get the appropriate rest.
yes, yes, and it leaves you more susceptible to catch illnesses too if you don't get that proper rest.
And you're not at your best in analyzing and thinking and business and taking care of your business and dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And as you know, from a business person, if you don't take care of your business won't take care of you. So there'll be some problems there. So you've got to be meticulous in that. And no matter how many people that you bring into your business, ultimately, if you are the person in charge of the business and it's your business, you still have to occasionally look over do the tedious part of making sure that everything is done right, because ultimately it's on you. So, rest is important for all those particular reasons too, to keep you sharp so that you can do well in your business and in your personal life, and so that you're not snapping at people because you don't have enough rest. So all that is part of your success in business, in the work you do, and in your personal life. You got to have a balance. If you don't have that balance, then it'll all come crashing down on you. You won't be successful in business. You won't be successful in your spiritual life or in your personal life.
Speaking of personal life, I'm checking out your wall with all of these accomplished black black historians. I guess out of all of your pictures, which one would be your favorite?
I'm actually actually appreciative of all of them. I have everybody here from James Baldwin to Rosa Parks to Paul Robeson to Cindy Poitier and Harry Belafonte, people who, Colin Kaepernick, people who made Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month. And I never want to believe that my success, besides God being my foundation, I never want to believe that my success is based on just what I do. All of these people sacrificed so much. Some of them dealt with difficult situations. Some of them were assassinated, persecuted, and I never want us to forget about them. So I have them here in my office for all the work I do, knowing that no matter how much I have to sacrifice, they sacrifice so much more. And I don't want us to forget their names because all too often we don't give proper credit to the people who have paved the way for us. Whites seem to do that even more so. They've got a Lincoln Memorial and a Washington Memorial and the statues everywhere. And we don't give enough credit to the people who have come before us. So I always want them looking over me. And I always, when I come down to sitting here to do work, want to be able to look in Toni Morrison, one of the greatest writers ever, James Baldwin, and The Fire Next Time, and all his book, If Bill Street Could Talk, and all of his writings, and even people who, like Mother Teresa, who I have her picture over here, because she was truly, truly, truly sacrificed so much. I never forget reading her story, even as a white Catholic woman, when she had did so much, given so much of her life up for the poor, and someone decided to reward her near the end of her life and gave her a Rolls Royce. And as soon as they gave it to her, she sold it and used the money to buy food for the poor. She said, I don't need any of that. My entire mission, my service is to God, and then to me second. And that kind of dedication, I just want to keep in my head all the time, because if I keep that in my head, it keeps you humble. If you know, first and foremost, your service is to God. So everything else, every case I work on, every lecture I give, every group of students I talk to, and we can still get financially rewarded for the work we do. But first, if our service to God, and these people right here, they weren't getting a lot of money. They weren't wealthy, but they had a mission. And I always want to keep that at the forefront of my mind. I always want to remember what they gave up. And I don't really care whether they were Muslim or Christian or whatever they were. I want to stay focused on the fact that they sacrificed something, because in the end, God will judge all those other pieces. But they gave so much for us. So I think it's important for us to consistently use them as inspiration. And one of the best ways to use them as inspiration is to see their faces, not just to talk about them. And, you know, men are very visual anyway. That's how men operate. I mean, we do, and otherwise we're very visual. That's why, you know, we get it. That even gets us in trouble sometimes. But we're very visual. So me being a man, being visual, I want to see their faces, not just read their words. I want to walk in here in the morning as I begin to work and see their faces, and it does something to my spirit.
So who would you say is your role model?
All of them, to be honest with you. You know, Paul Robeson gave up so much. He was such a brilliant artist, such a brilliant actor. And then when they tried to get him to denounce the people he was working with, because they could be communists, and they brought him before Congress, he said, you know, here I stand. They said, well, are you a communist? Are you? He said, here I stand. I'm gonna tell you what I stand for. I'm not, and you can decide what I am, whatever way you want to do it, but I'm not going to answer your questions the way you want me to answer them. In this book, the one book that he wrote is called Here I Stand. And what he said is that you should define yourself by what you are, not by what you're not. Don't let anyone back you into a corner. And he said, label it whatever you want to label it, but let me tell you what I stand for. And then he named these things. He said, don't put a label on me. I always tell people when they ask me about party affiliation, Democrat or Republican, you know, Malcolm X once said, I'm not a jackass or an elephant, and I have sense enough to know it. And I said to people, don't define yourself by a party, define yourself by an issue. If there's someone who represents you, who represents your issues, then that's who you're with. I'm with that person because they represent my issues. But the jackass or the elephant doesn't mean anything to me. And then what Paul Robeson did in Here I Stand is when he addressed that, was a very powerful statement. So that allows me to define myself by what I am, and rather than defend myself by what I'm not. I don't ever start a presentation, even if it's to a group of whites, by saying, well, I'm not a racist, and because I'm not defining myself. I'm going to tell you what I stand for, and you can judge me however you want to. In the end, only God can judge me. But you can say whatever you want to, but you're going to know how I feel, what I'm thinking, and then you can do what you want to with it. And all these people were exactly that way, from James Baldwin to Rosa Parks. I mean, like I said, her career is so far much bigger than anything that happened with the Montgomery bus boycott and her sitting on the bus. If you know all the work she did before she even met Dr. King, before she even became secretary of the NAACP, the work she did for these women who were being raped and gang raped, and the sacrifices she made going out in the middle of the night to protect these women before we even get to the Montgomery bus boycott, then that inspires me, her mission, her purpose. and what she did with that, and what Toni Morrison did, and what her writing, the life she lived in that. All of these people inspire me. All of them are different and similar in their own way, and many of them suffered backlash from even people in their own communities, but it didn't change their behavior. When Booker T. Washington died, in his autopsy, they said he died from the black man's disease. In other words, there were blacks who were criticizing his method, and there were whites who was criticizing him because he was black, and he had to live in that vice in between them. And then later on, the student of Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, came along and said, never confuse the methods with the objectives. So if me and you, Nicole, have two different methods, as long as we have a positive objective, then we can do our own thing. So all of them had different methods in different ways, but all of them were willing to sacrifice. All of them were seeking justice. All of them were God inspired. All of them were in service of God, and then secondly, of service of something, however they define God. All of them did that. And as a result of that, that should keep all of us humble, because I mean, these are the people who are so important. And like I said, I have to see their face every morning as I sit down here to do my work. That inspires me. And when I get tired, I remember how tired they were, and they still kept going so that we could be in the position that we're in today.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Janine Faulkner said this is needed information. Walter said, wow, that is crazy. Never known that that's what happened in the FBI. So that's back when we were talking about the racism. Monica says, again, information is power. Denise says, listening from Rocky Mount, North Carolina, my cousin is speaking the truth. And say that again.
I'm so thankful for you giving me the opportunity to be on. I mean, I told your producer that I would, no matter how I was feeling, I get energized whenever I'm on with you. I know the last time we were on, we had an excellent conversation, because I think this is part of my life mission. And so you giving me an opportunity, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for that. And I know how passionate you are about business, about the work you do, and so on and so forth. This is not just a program for you. This is a way of life, and the program is a part of that. So.
Oh, thank you so much. And Monica says, great program. Thanks, Nicole. And thank you, Dr. Powers. So they definitely get it. They hear what you're saying. And it's so important to get this word out. And, for us to read, honestly, I've been seeing a lot of TikToks and a lot of women doing the twerking. And I was like, if I see another woman twerking, and then even children, people encouraging children to twerk, how about let's see somebody reading a book? How about let's have a TikTok about us reading Black history books? Like, we just have to change our mindset. Unfortunately, if I was on here doing having a comedian on here, and we're talking about something funny, well, I do have a comedian on here. People don't know. But if we was talking about, if I had a comedian on here talking about something funny, we'd probably have more of an audience, because it's like we run to entertainment, but we stay away from getting that positive information that we need to help us to move to the next level. And go ahead.
We've been socialized to do that, though. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Negro History Week, which became Black History Month, one of his famous statements in his book is, when you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. In other words, he said that psychological slavery was much more powerful than the putting chains on you, because it has your mind. So the young people you see, like you said, doing the twerking and all, they've been socialized to think and to work that way. And what I try to do with young people, because I know if they haven't been socialized, and if they don't see their parents necessarily reading, then you're gonna have to walk them down that path. You're gonna have to walk them down, because what they're doing is responding to their environment and what they see others are doing. And if you want them to do better, you're going to have to kind of walk them down there. And that's the whole, the whole philosophy behind Black History Month. I was up at Kane University in New Jersey giving a presentation, and this is a majority white audience there, and we were doing Black History Month, and there was a black guy, a young black guy on the front row, and he said, Doc, he said, well, he raised his hand on a question period. He said, why did we get Black February as Black History Month? He said, it's the shortest month of the year. And I put up a picture of Dr. Carter G. Woodson on the screen. I said, do you know who that is? And then he said, no, I don't know. I don't know who that is. I said, so if they gave you 35 days, you wouldn't know who the hell it was. So I'm saying this. My point to him was this: concentrate on the substance, not just the time. And then he understood that. He didn't even take it as offenses. He said, you're absolutely right. He said, I'm arguing about how many days, and I didn't even recognize the man who created the month in the first place. I can't even give him honor because I'm so busy focusing on this. And then I explained to him, I said, whites didn't choose February. Dr. Carter G. Woodson chose it because it's the birthday of Frederick Douglass. Birthday is in February, and Abraham Lincoln. So whites didn't choose February for us. The man who created it chose February to give honor to Frederick Douglass and to give honor to Abraham Lincoln for signing the Emancipation Proclamation. So it's not like someone chose this month for us, but he was appreciative of the knowledge. And then after it was over, he came up, he said, I'm glad you taught me that. He said, because all through K through 12, I had never learned that. He said, now I can go give that to someone else. So I think our young people will do better when they know better. And we're going to have to kind of walk them down there because they're hit with so many images in their brain and in social media and so on and so forth. And their brains are moving so fast with all this mess. We got to slow them down if we're going to get them to read. And that's the whole thing with the images too. I always said to all of us, in your homes, your walls have got to be full of Black images, Black art, Black images. You know, my daughter does art, so Black images, because young people will increase their esteem and their concept if they're surrounded by likenesses of themselves, and they see that you're promoting that they see that. I mean, if they walk in and they're seeing images of something else or just flowers and this and that, then that doesn't mean as much to them. But because their brain works through seeing, you need to have Black art in your house. You really do need. That does something to the brain. You don't even know what it's doing to them. But when they are older, they will remember my mother having that beautiful Black art in my walls in my entire house are all full with Black art, whether it's Alvin Ailey dancers or whatever else. But they see that. They see it. And that's how my daughter got into doing Black art. That's how my son's bedroom is full with great pictures like the pictures I have here, and great sayings and so on and so forth. Because even if he's not thinking about it, when he gets up in the morning, if he's seeing something like that, psychologically it impacts him. So you don't have to yell at him all the time. They just has to be a part of their existence. And unfortunately, what's part of their existence is the social media thing. So you have to counter that so that when they're in your space, they're seeing something different. They're seeing this every day and feeling it every day. And they will internalize it, even if they don't know they are internalizing.
Wow, that's awesome. So my husband said, great show. And Janine Faulkner said, could you put that up one more time? Thanks for the gems and information, learning a lot. So as our show comes to a close, is there anything that you would like to close us out with saying?
Just, you know what, I just don't want us to be pessimistic about, I know things are difficult in our communities. We're dealing with all kind of issues, the race issue, and certainly the intersectionality of racism and sexism and misogynistic behavior. Domestic violence cases have skyrocketed since COVID-19. We need to discuss that. The suicide rate among Black children aged 5 to 12 have doubled. Think about this. How do you get to 5 years old and decide to commit suicide? Have doubled for Black children. This is for Black children. The suicide rate, ages 5 to 12. Now, we never talk about suicide on the news because nobody cares about us killing ourselves. the violence that they see impact the economy. But if you go in your house and kill yourself, think about that, between the age of 5 and 12. So we have young people who just came out of the womb 5 years ago, already deciding by 5 to 12 that it's not worth being here. So we've got to look at those things, even if other people are not talking about them, so we can develop strategies to change that. We don't have to be pessimistic. We can be optimistic, but we have to be optimistic with work and service. So that's all I would.
The sad thing is, I work with youth, and I tell people about this is not just something new. This has been going on. The young ladies that I work with, you'd be so surprised at how many of them have had those suicidal thoughts, and we've had to get them help. But you'll be surprised at how many people know the work that I do, but don't reach in their pocket to support an organization that's doing the work, that's stopping these children from having these type of thoughts, that's helping to change their trajectory. Like, what can we do as people to get people to support other our Black people?
I think there's a lot of people that will support our work if they if not everyone will, because some people are just not going to do it. They just not going to do it. But I think if people, if you're going to have to paint a picture for them of the devastation that you're seeing and why your work is so key and necessary. In other words, biblically, when we talk about when we read the Bible, it'll say, if you don't live the right life, you're gonna face hellfire, or you can face streets of gold. Well, I can see that, so I'm gonna say, you know what, I'm gonna stick closer to these streets of gold. So you almost have to paint a picture of the pain and what you're trying to do to stop it. You just can't say it. You almost have to paint a picture. Like when we're dealing with young people and I'm trying to tell them not to do things to send them to prison, I tell them a 20-second decision can take away the next 20 years of their life. And I said, those next 20 years of your life will be in a cell next to a toilet. Now I have to describe the cell in detail. So you almost have to paint a picture for people so they feel it, not just hear it. And then they will say, you know what, I do want to help you with that. But that's how you're gonna have to be that vivid. You have to paint, you have to be an artist about the devastation of the pain that you're seeing in these children and the work you're trying to do. And then when people hear those stories, you're gonna have to highlight those stories with those young people, and then people will give. But they've got to feel it. And the only way they can feel it is for us to paint a picture. We have to be artistic in our conversation about the devastation that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Great show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and I look forward to being on with you again at some point in the future.
Oh, I'm going to call.
And I'm going to show up because I'm scared of you.
So don't forget to go and purchase his 25th edition. And say the name of the book again.
Eyes to My Soul, The Rise or Decline of a Black FBI Agent.
And where can it be purchased at?
You can, at my website is drtyronepowers.com, or you can email me at powers@tpowersconsulting.com if you want me to autograph it and send it to you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much again, Dr. Powers. So I know a little, some people are saying, well, what is EWBI? Empower Women in Business International. We serve a sisterhood of women entrepreneurs who understand that individually we could do great things, but collectively we can forever change the world. Members of our movement experience a support system that allows them to celebrate their wins and share their struggles in a series of opportunities that enhance them personally and professionally. If that sounds like an organization that you would like to be a part of, visit our website at www.ewbiradio.org. Again, it's www.ewbiradio.org. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like our social media page so that you can follow some of our guests and see when they will be on. And you can tune in to our show right here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. So to keep it locked every Tuesday, 7 p.m. right here on Empowered Women in Business International Radio Show. And I'll close as always. Individually, we can do great things, but collectively, we can forever change the world by Nick Mosby. God bless and see you next Tuesday.